Human Institute and others from Brussels. Unfortunately, some of them did not even answer because they obviously do not like the debate and do not want to dispute with us. But as we know, ideas matter, and this is why we have asked and used the facilities and the wonderful brains of the many young students of UDG. And Milica and Maya and the other staff here at the university was kind enough to run workshops with the students on the future of Europe and how they see it, whether it should be ever closer union or a complete federation or open or whatever. So there are 3 working groups and they will present their results, and everything will be run by our good friend Daniel Kadik, who has a lot of experience with these kind of workshops. And after that, we would like to invite you to help us build a huge platform across Europe with as many people as possible to shape the debate. And of course, we want them to convince everybody to be a libertarian, but to make this happen, we need a lot of people on our side and many on all sides of Europe, from east to west, from north to south, from young academics to students, to entrepreneurs, to managers, to journalists. We need everybody involved in this, and this is why this will be such a difficult. And this is why this is such a difficult task. Without further ado, I hand over to Daniel and then to our students. Thank you for helping and for joining.
Thank you very much, Barbara. You can do that. Indeed, we are going to try something different this morning, meaning some input, some presentation, some fresh view on the topic before we then actually we'll pick all of your brains and try to find some common points that we can use in the future for the project that Barbara has mentioned, and she will be explaining later a bit about. And if we look at Europe at the moment, from a libertarian or conservative standpoint, it's the big "I told you so." Libertarians and conservatives have for a very long time warned about the problems that this ad hoc reaction of the European Union to challenges and threats have caused. And actually that's something they've been admitting in the white paper. That's the first point. They said, okay, we can go on like this, we can react ad hoc to problems. Maybe you should not do that in the future anymore. That's why we need now, after 60 years after the Treaty of Rome, we had the Rome Summit, we had the white paper, where there are some basic ideas written down. But again, it's only basic ideas. There's nothing concrete, there's no which direction do we actually want to go into. It's just the call for, well, a proper discussion. Talking about the discussion, what I would like to do this morning now, hear first the presentations of the students, then comment on that very shortly after the 3 presentations, and then engage in a discussion with you before we go in the, let's call, World Cafe style of discussion with you later on. So, without any further ado, I would like to invite the first group here in front. I would ask you to introduce yourself very shortly, describe with 2 words the task you had at hand, and then we are looking forward to your presentation. Please.
Distinguished guests, dear professors, fellow colleagues, good morning and thank you for coming and joining us on this workshop. We are the students of 3rd year of International Economics, Finance and Business here at UDG. My name is Prvoslav Vojinović. We were given a task of brainstorming on the values and the ideal future of Europe and the European Union. from the three different points of view. That is, Group A is a socialist point of view, Group B Federalist, and Group C Reformist point of view. Every group had two leaders that worked on collected ideas and further worked on them. You can see the process here in the pictures. And my group, Group A, I will present the first. The other member of the group couldn't come this morning, unfortunately. So we believe in the ever closer union. So some of our views are social equality, making sure that everyone is treated equally, human rights and dignity, which means that no individual is more privileged than any other, civil freedoms, and this includes freedom of thought, freedom of expression, and also every other freedom, as long as it doesn't affect other people's freedom. Democracy, of course, as a cornerstone of every progressive society. Mobility of people, mobility of capital and goods, and openness on the level of European Union. Tolerance and understanding of different cultures, because Europe consists of tens of different cultures. Solidarity and mutual support, making sure that nobody is left behind. Peaceful conflict resolvence. Quality education for youth, because youth are important, very important members of society. Of course, rule of law. There is no progress without rule of law, quality rule of law. Strongly regulated economic activities, making sure that there are no monopolies and no exploitation, and that workers' rights are not hurt. Also protecting domestic EU producers from foreign competition through subsidies and tariffs. And some of our views for ideal future, for a stronger European Union, would be European welfare state, social equality and distribution of wealth, further uniting of the European countries, fiscal and monetary harmonization on the level of the Union, European military and strong and secure border protection, universal basic income, because everybody deserves to have decent dignity, and mutual foreign policy, national governments that would execute they would be the executive body of to implement laws and strategies from the central government of European Union. Unique European passport, unique education system throughout the EU for elementary education. We would take English to be an official language on the level of European Union, plus local languages, of course, but English would be an official. Harmonized laws that would protect human rights and workers' rights, and the central government that would decide on major laws and regulations. And of course, a quick remark, none of us here are socialists. We are just trying to give our views, our opinions from the point of view of socialists.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I like how much you stayed in character for all of that. Questions?
Would you have national football teams and athletic teams in the Olympics, or is it all one European team?
No, we would have national teams for every nation, but they would be united in one to say, federal government, federal country, European Union. But of course, there are differences among every country, and differences would be respected. And
Montenegrins would only play handball and...
So you would have the UK approach to the Olympics, going together in the Olympics, but for football going into separate competitions.
What
What would you call the competition where national teams would compete?
European competition, federal competition.
1, 2.
First of all, thank you. You did a fantastic job. You kept yourself from laughing, but I really admired that you actually presented a positive case from the socialist point of view, and that's admirable given, you're still in college and all that. It takes a lot of skill and technique to be able to present a positive case for an opposing view. During your presentation, there were some, and you know it as a non-socialist, that there were a lot of contradictions. For example, rule of law and the goal of economic equality, or the rule of law with regulation and all that. When you were doing this research, were you able to identify these contradictions and maybe, having immersed yourself in the minds in the way that socialists think, how would you go about explaining to them the different point of view? Did you use that as an experience to dig deeper into that?
We were not, our view is not economic equality, just social equality, but with strong regulations that would protect the workers. And yes, we did the research, but we got to keep in mind that this is a libertarian university, so we are not that qualified to talk about socialism. We are more promoting liberal ideas and liberal free markets, free market economy, things like that.
But it surely helped to actually try to step in the other one's shoes to dismantle the, let's call them arguments they have.
Bronislav, quick questions. When you were discussing those points, and all these things have a price tag, did you think from the socialist perspective how to finance that? Or is it just more taxes and more money printing?
Well, since government is not producing anything, the only way would be higher taxes and more printing of money, so that would be the only way.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
As you are a student of University of Donja Gorica, and you know that we are trying to influence the way of thinking of our students. You said that you would have unique educational system. Is this somehow related to the idea of socialism?
We said that it would be a unique educational system on the level of elementary education. So let's say the kids from France and from Montenegro would have the same elementary education. But for university education and high school, it would be, of course, different. But they would all have the same basics, the same ground. That basic elementary education would be the same throughout the Union.
Okay, I will close the Q&A session after 1, 2. Wait.
Since the goal or the challenge here that Pierre Garello and Krasis Stanchev and a couple of others have discussed is to create something which is a common denominator, where even the center, I would not say left, but the center reasonable people could join the effort. Which boxes do you think those people would check when we have all those 3 presentations together? So we should keep that in mind. And maybe, do you have a list of all the arguments that we can distribute, and then we can check the boxes? Because this would be a nice exercise, I think, for everybody of us.
Okay, we have a list. So
Yeah, and indeed, and I can only underline what you just said. It makes we talked about how are we more successful in what we do as think tanks, as institutes, and it's clearly not in trying to go into fundamental opposition to everything our opponents are saying, but rather seeking alliances where we've never thought about seeking alliances before, going with socialists in the event in the instance you mentioned, into alliances and work jointly with them, rather convincing them the software instead of trying to bash them in the face.
Thank you. I think that this was an excellent work you did. I just wanted to ask one. You mentioned the universal rent or universal salary for everyone as one of the points the socialists would point out. And when you were doing this exercise, did you discuss about how that would create inflation? And you know, because socialists are always talking about this universal rent, but then they limit it to a small amount, let's say. And then why not 10,000 euros per month for everyone if it's so good? And what the consequences of that salary equality, the harming consequences for the economy would be? Did you deepen into that a bit?
Well, we assumed that people who would receive this basic income, they would not be motivated to stay on the bottom their whole life. And this would be their basic income, and like steps to climb, and they would be guaranteed this universal income, but it would not be a lot of money, and they would be motivated to compete and to grow and to earn a bigger salary.
Great. Thank you very much once more again. Can I have a big round of applause this time?
Thank you.
And a second one for him doing it all by himself today because his friends didn't come.
Thank you.
Please. So, second group.
Hello everyone, my name is Maria Skenjic and my group is Group B. I work with my colleague Slobodan Franeta. I'm going to talk about beliefs in Federalist Europe. We believe that only by uniting into European Federation could the state of Europe overcome the divisions of the past and ensure a future of peace and economic prosperity. We concluded that European economic and political unity is urgently required to ensure Europe's economic prosperity. Our colleagues are critical of the slow pace and and small steps policy that impedes progress towards a greater European integration. We would like to raise the citizen awareness of European issues and need for European political unity through organized campaigns, public debates, conferences in schools and universities. Also, we believe that the creation of federal Europe is the only way to ensure the Europe because ensure that Europe becomes a peaceful and prosperous place of all Europeans. That because we will make that continent where is democracy, rule of law, peace, responsibility, freedom and solidarity are promoted and regarded as the most important values. Our ideal future for EU and Europe is that Europe will not be united if it's not democratic. Europe will not be democratic if it's not a federation. And the very important process is a building of Eurozone. And also our ideal future for EU and Europe is dealing with the crisis, federal government changes, better democracy, and deeper legitimacy. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. We already have questions here, so I will keep my input short.
Good morning. My name is Slobodan Franet, and I was part of this group, so I wanted to add some things as well. First of all, we have two ideas. Through my experience, I had a lot of meetings with young people from Federalists who are fighting for uniting Europe, and I tried to understand what is their goal and how we could promote the free market in together with them, because some of the things they're promoting are maybe can be very useful, and we try to put that in this paper and in our conversation. The second thing came from one of papers I did a few months ago for international economics course, where I wrote about 2074, how it would look and what is the future of Europe. And there I stated that maybe Europe could be, it was a fiction because that was a novel, but the thing is that I saw that United States of Free Europe, which is something like we have now in United States of America, but more free, more capitalistic, and more free market oriented. So those were some of the things we have in mind in discussing with our colleagues, and most of them agree that we could arrange something like this. So in general, I wanted just to point that, to thank Maria for taking this role, and I will be also open for questions to help her in this presentation.
I'm sorry if I sound a bit stupid, but it's early in the morning. Could you just summarize the key differences between your recommendations and the last speaker? It sounded the same to me.
My colleague will answer that because he will... Could you help me, please?
So the main difference between, if I understand Europe and Socialist. Oh, yes. Well, in general, we thought that while discussing, there was a united Europe in sense of political, but economically it would be more free market oriented, and it would based on the individuals, on private enterprises, on low taxes and other things. The second part of our idea was from this novel, 2074, where I described how economic system of Europe worked, how, for example, one part of Italy is becoming European Silicon Valley, how Europeans are trading, how there is no regulation, there is low bureaucracy, we don't have a socialistic approach to economics, we don't have those, how to say, we don't have social benefits. Everything is oriented to private enterprises, to entrepreneurship. We only have small regional government who are protecting through constitution individuals' freedom, and that's our point where we are different from the socialists.
Good morning. My name is Nevena. Thank you, both of you, for your presentations. And I just would continue you. We are colleagues, actually. So you said that it will be more economic freedom, but what have you tried to understand or foresee what could happen with central banks or with all the monetary policy, if the question is too broad, maybe?
Yeah, Nevena and I are having always debates about those things, so we are something like natural enemies on the classmate, well, in positive ways. The thing we are seeing here, that Europe is having a huge problem with, for example, we have a huge regulation and huge obstacles for entrepreneurs. We don't have a lot of development in that area and that industry, like we have, for example, in United States or some other countries. Maybe the good thing that we now have is Estonia, which is developing, but in general, I think free market-based policies would be oriented to this, to encourage entrepreneurs and to encourage free trade and to encourage producing and having unregulated market. And regarding central banks, well, I'm not the big fan of them, to be honest. I wrote a few days ago a paper also for our courses, if you remember, is that I would like to see cryptocurrencies coming back, because I believe that they are our next new gold standard, and that it could be somehow exclude the central banks from the system, because at this moment I think they're just making huge problems to the societies.
Only if that question is regarding to the group in general or not the gentleman personal in his opinion. Yeah. Okay, is there any more question to the group? Any more comment to the group? To Barbara first.
Define federalism and a federal Europe, because I think this is a big misunderstanding. Even us libertarians don't have a common definition on that.
Yes, I find because we need to, I just said that we need to raise citizens' awareness of European issues, so yeah.
But what is federalism in your
freedom, because we need to...
Yeah.
Yeah.
So anybody else from that group, how you define federalism? Yeah.
Well, I think everything we can see from the two perspectives. In this case, federalism can lead us to the socialism or communism, but it also can bring us to the more capitalistic and more free market-oriented society. So in general, it's about people who are implementing those ideas. So personally, for me, it is united, unique market where we can exchange goods and services without having a lot of regulations.
The question Barbara was hinting to, and I agree with you, because our good friend Andy Bernstein always is quoting Confucius, and he's saying, seek to it that things are called by their right names. And that is something we actually should do. What do we mean by federalism? Are we talking about a European state that has some sort of federal structure, like the Federal Republic of Germany, for instance, with a very strong central government and a certain level of subsidiarity that is reflected in federalism? Or are we talking about about a federation of nations that are under a relatively weak and relatively lean umbrella? That is the question we have to answer in this respect, and therefore I think Barbara raised a very important point. I have one more question here.
Thank you, and maybe this is a follow-up to that. In the United States, of course, we have a relatively strong federal government, but all of our states are free to set their own policies. Some are more pro-market than others. We have California, which tends to be very left, and we have other states that are far more free market. Now, in your concept of a federation or a federal state, would you have that sort of autonomy at the local and nation level?
Well, yes. The first association of when we took this project was United States of America system, but with less government and less regulation. We are not that familiar with all regulation in the United States, but I have some friends and I'm communicating with them, and they're trying to present me the problems in the United States, and I'm a bit aware of that. And we wanted to see if that can be implemented to the Europe, if Europe can become something like that. And maybe that can be a chance for Europe to grow, because we have some projection where in 2050 only 8% of a global market will be in Europe, which is very bad. And maybe this can be a chance to improve the competitiveness of Europe on the global scale. Maybe that can be a solution, and maybe that can unite all European nations to work more and to produce more and to become a leading economic power.
Thank you. Is there any more question, comment? That would then be the last one.
In your view of a European federation, would the current nation states be the units of that federation, or would it be possible for anyone to secede and create new units in the federation?
Who wants to answer this?
He will answer.
Okay. Have to ask.
Well, that's tricky, because when I was on some seminar in Bosnia, I said some pretty radical. I asked where they were arguing about, there are two countries in one, and I was asked why wouldn't they separate if it will be better for them. And I was attacked, and it was very radical, and they, I think they're still angry on me. So I'm not sure how I can say that, but in general I'm supporting it. I'm supporting creation of maybe microstates, new microstates. For example, I will give also radical examples, but that's how I see it. In Montenegro, the majority of revenues are coming from the southern part, and there is always that battle that, for example, we have almost 90,000 people in public administration, and mostly and majority tourism is feeding that public administration and that huge government. Recently, I wrote an article that is called "Small Country, Big Government" for Montenegro, and in general, that's the problem, because you see, there is always one part of the country that is that need to lead the another, and we still want to live in socialistic mentality. And I would support the creation of new microstates, but we need to be realistic. I cannot see that can happen really easy, and in this world, I'm not sure that can be possible, but I would support it.
Well, from a German perspective, I can very well understand that we from Hamburg are feeding all the guys in Berlin with their massive administration, without them creating any value whatsoever, except for creating regulations. So please join us here in the front. There are enough spaces here left, and to quote the Bible, the last will be the first. So sitting in the first row at least. So can I have a big round of applause for the presentation?
Thank you.
So, hello everyone, my name is Aljoša Drobnjak. My group had a task to do the European Union as a reformist one. Technically, we like the current state of the European Union as it's now, but we strongly believe that through some various types of reforms, there is plenty of space for improvements. First question that was regarding that we had to cover was basically what do we think that what do we take as European values right now? I had some tasks. So at first we believe that Europe and European Union is basically a single market which allows more economic specialization and which encourages economic growth. Basically meaning that all countries can work together, share the same market and achieve the full potential. Moving on to next, Europe is about free movement of goods, services, labor and capital, which is the core value of European Union, allowing everyone to travel free and work wherever they want. Third aspect is equal rights for all European Union citizens, which is due to European law that's protecting all the citizens equally. Fourth is promoting globalization and countries without borders. We're all witnesses of worldwide globalization, and it's only logical that you can grow if you're not open to the outside world. Moving on to the next is peaceful relations between member countries, and the best example for this is relations between France and Germany after World War II. Promoting freedom and liberty in general, which is indicated by the policies of free, uninterrupted movement of goods, services and labor. Last but not the least is a single currency as a value of European Union that provides stability and security. Next task that we had is our vision or our future seeing of the European Union through some reforms. So on the other side, we believe that European Union will benefit from some of these reforms. We didn't name them all, of course, since we had such little time, but we found a few of them. First would be restructuring European Union's budget, meaning basically simple, European Union should spend their money more efficient than they're doing now. A huge problem that we found in European Union's budget is much spendings on agricultural in general, since there's a thing called Common Agricultural Policy that's currently spending 23% according to European Central Bank, 23% of European Union's budget, while food and resources that are being used in the very process are constantly being wasted. So European Union should work on improving the way they use resources and to aim to decrease the opportunity costs in this aspect. Third reform that we had in our mind would be general bureaucracy decrease, implying that there should be less paperwork, complications, sorry, in general, and that by that we would make everyone's everyday life processes much simpler, much easier. And last but not least, important, European Union should take care in bringing back the European Union's classic values and promoting even more and making everyone feel overall freedom at any state. We strongly believe that reforms will that some of these reforms will make improvement, and there is possible some possible outcomes of European Union would be that whether European Union stays the same as it is now, or through some kind of specialization of countries at some fields, or I don't know, taking focus on actual things, doing less work but more efficient, since some fields are asking for too much of budget of European Union currently, but they're technically not doing anything. To sum up our work, group's work, we value European Union the way it's now, but we're absolutely sure that through some types of reforms, there's place for huge improvements. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So you would stay in, one of my masters was in European studies, and when I asked my professor, so what is the European Union? And then he just told me, the European Union is a political subject sui generis, a political subject without precedent. I said, yeah, but what does that mean? Yeah, well, we don't know. And that is something I also hear in what you just said. Any questions, comments to that?
Did I understand you correctly that you mentioned one currency?
Yeah.
In a reformed Europe? Single currency?
Well, yeah, as a value, I mean, I'm aware that it's not in all European Union countries, and we're talking about European Union, not Europe. Single currency as a stability, since most of the countries in European Union use the euro. That was our point.
Fair point. Please mind yourself that these ladies and gentlemen in front are in character, and that the presentations they're giving are not necessarily reflecting their own opinion. Any questions, comments? Absolutely.
Where's our common denominator for Europe, for European think tanks, for people who... Sorry, I would simply throw this open now. And where is the common denominator for us as think tankers and as freedom fighters? Where can we check the boxes? Where can we throw our projects out to the market of ideas, and whether we should, and I think this is then the next step, cooperate or not. And thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Those are very interesting contributions. And what I was going to say was, I come from Dublin in Ireland, and I used to be, and many of us, many of my friends were very Eurosceptic and remain so about the institutions, about the deepening integration. And the only reaction to crisis in Europe and to a crisis in the euro has been to have deeper and faster integration. However, I've had a major change of mind, and many of us have, given what we've seen happening in Ireland in the last few years, which is, and this is why I have a problem with Brexit as well, and I argue this constantly with English people. The only hope for a country like Ireland, where the political culture is populist, enthralled to a public sector, to trade unions, the only hope for competition and free markets is actually Europe. We have a rail system which is antiquated, overstaffed, overpaid, loses money, and Brussels constantly tells us we must privatise or part privatise, and we don't do it. The Irish government doesn't do it, even the centre-right government does it. The liberation of the pharma chemists, shops, whatever you call it, drugstores in America, that was brought by Europe. Competition policy everywhere. You know, it goes for broadband, for TV, because so it's almost become a state where a case where those of us who support free market competition would look to Brussels and not really in its bureaucracy to save us from a statist anti-free market instinct at home in Ireland. And that the Troika program that Ireland went into after a crash in 2010, the IMF, ECB Troika, imposed a series of conditions, all of which were beneficial to free markets, to competition and to commerce. And even they left too early. I mean, I would personally have the German bankers, all due respect to yourself, parked in Dublin permanently in the hotel they stayed in, a very good hotel, by the way, called the Marion Hotel. Because when they left too early, our legal sector, where barristers and solicitors, we have the division in the legal sector, overpaid, protected cartel, mainly on state fees. Many of them are my friends. I don't begrudge them, but I do envy them. Well, maybe I do begrudge them. The Troika was gone before they could be, they said, you've got to sort this out, you've got to open it up. So anyway, I could go on and on, but so that's just the competition policy. There are other aspects to what have made me and many of us in our group more supportive of the European project. Every time we come to Eastern Europe and look at all the ethnic tensions there are here, constantly bubbling away, we think that the only thing that can kind of ameliorate that or sort it out is a larger, more benign structure. But it has to be a loose arrangement. What we don't want is a deepening federal project. We just want a more efficient and more disciplined EU. So that's my contribution. Thank you. Yeah.
Wait.
Sorry, Iman, you just said not a deeper federal structure. Isn't this a contradictio in se?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I mean, okay. So I'll have to rephrase that. Not okay. So not a deeper federal structure. That's what we fear. And incidentally, in our group, we are very divided on this. My chairman, Cormac Lucy, you can see the stuff I've been tweeting, is very suspicious of a federal project which is unaccountable and unelected. I think, Barbara, what I mean is a more disciplined, tighter EU, and one that is not apologizing for like coming and imposing this competition policy. I mean, I think in a nutshell, although the project of the EU was looked as, in terms of labour law, as a great left-wing project, its potential is to be the most exciting free market, you know, the world has ever seen. And this is what I wish that the British would come on board and drive this with the Germans and with others. But for reasons of English nationalism, imperial nostalgia, and alarm over immigrants, they've decided to go out the door on a popular vote. So that's yeah.
Thank you very much. Just one quick comment, and that is, I also don't understand the Brexit fetish that some so-called libertarians or conservatives have. This, might even say, and might get some people angry with me, this childish joy that people had when UK left or decided to leave the European Union. Because countries are not islands, except for the UK, which is an island, but still, it is not an island in the vastness of all the countries around it. You are a puny, tiny country compared to China, India, United States, you name it. And if you want to enjoy the freedoms, also from a German perspective, within Europe, you need some sort of framework for that. We need to discuss in Europe what we do with borders. I mean, immigration was one of the big points that led ultimately to the Brexit, the yes for the Brexit. But the question is, how do we secure the internal freedoms in the realm of Europe? And it is completely illusionary to think that we can have the same level of prosperity in Europe with a world and a neighborhood that is so vastly different. And I cannot understand, if you are talking about imperfect economic zones and why a single currency cannot work in an imperfect economic zone, and then talk about immigration and that can work, unregulated immigration. I do not understand how you can think we can have a common border policy without a policy body, a policy-making body. I do not understand these factors, and I hope that these are things we can discuss later on. But there was a comment in front.
Thank you. I find this whole discussion fascinating. And from Atlas, we work with 136 European think tanks that belong to the whole wide range, from Eurosceptic to, you know, with certain reservation pro-EU. And what I think, you know, if we judge from what we've seen in Europe and the United States and other experiments with supranational entities, as far as the liberty movement that Barbara asked, what are the questions we should be asking ourselves? In my view, there are two very clear, and I'm not sure they're even reconcilable, approaches to the European Union. One is, let's fight for a better European Union and define better. And the other one is, let's go back to the nation state and save ourselves from the coming catastrophe. That will be the, you know, the deeper federal European Union. And I find both of these approaches to be, I side with the better EU, personally. As an organization, we don't have a particular choice, but the really important question that we need to be asking ourselves is this federation that Eamon wished away, the deeper federal state, all the signs point towards the direction that that's inevitable within the EU. When we compare the United States with Europe, I like to point out that when the United States built a federal state, they had a Thomas Jefferson and a George Washington, and classical liberal ideas were prevalent. Today in the EU, we're the farthest from, we're as far as possible from that. We have an obsession with positive rights, not negative rights. The European Constitution that would create a federal government would not be based on our ideas. It would be mirroring today's dominant political forces, the center-right and the center-left, the EPP and the Socialist, ALDE, which is somewhat closest to what we're thinking, is a small party in there with not the level of influence of the other bigger ones. So to me, the question is, how do we find a common agenda and hold back the rapid expansion that a federal Europe would bring? And that's if we buy into the European project. And I won't try to convince anyone who's Eurosceptic that they're wrong, because I'm not even sure myself.
Thank you very much.
So with libertarian support for the EU, it sort of assumes that it'll move towards classical liberalism. And if that is the assumption, then maybe that would be best. But the problem is, if it does move towards an anti-liberal standpoint, failure is complete. You don't have it localized in a certain place. The entirety of Europe would be in danger. Shouldn't we have experiments on a smaller scale? So if they do fail, like Europe will probably likely do, at least at some point, just like the United States, so that the problems are small enough that it won't hurt as many, and if they're successful, they'll be adopted by example versus pure force.
I can only agree with that, and then Barbara and I had the discussion during the Free Market Roadshow this year again, not talking about nation states, but talking about regions, making the units smaller, so it allows governments, people to actually experiment and engage in actual competition, and using that as a definition of federalization, taking the big nation state or the centralized states like France and others, and making them smaller, making them compete internally with each other. And I think that would be the big chance for Europe. But what is the framework for all of that? And that is something we need to discuss. How do we ensure that this all stays secure, that this realm of experimenting actually exists, and that we have the free movement, that I can decide, I don't like it in Hamburg, I'm moving to Sofia because I think the environment for setting up a business there is better, setting up my life is better there. How do we ensure that? And that is the big question in the end of the day.
So I come from a country which likes to experiment with regions. So I'm from Ukraine, and we had an experiment similar to what you've been talking about. It was done by Saakashvili, who became the president-appointed government of Odessa region, which is situated in the southern Ukraine. So he was given a right to do whatever he wants in that region, and hopefully then spread it around the country. So the first thing they did was clean out the customs, because a lot of import goes through the port of Odessa. And so they basically fired everyone, hired new people, and they broke all the schemes that were happening. So what happened as a result, all of the importers started avoiding Odessa, and they just went to other regions because they knew that the things were the same in other regions. So that's the problem with experimenting. Like, you need to make sure that even if the experiment is successful, it will go on. Because in our case, He was fired, Saakashvili. His whole team left Odessa, and it just returned the way it was before. So for our country, experiments didn't work, and like it's always an opportunity.
Well, one might add, and I hope you don't get it the wrong way, that Ukraine has a slight problem with rule of law and a slight problem with institution and corruption. And that again, that's the question. How much power can be transferred to the bigger level so we can sustain this realm of experimenting, of sustaining the rule of law in that realm, so we actually have sustainable projects, or, well, if they fail, they're not sustainable after all, but at least they're in competition with each other.
Just very quickly to respond to a couple of points. Alex, I think it's a very interesting point you made, but my thing would be not to lose heart. Of course, from a classical liberal, free market, centre-right, beyond centre-right perspective, EU is not perfect, and it has the tendencies in it of socialism, but that is the nature of the animal. I think that's the battleground we go in and fight in. You know, that's the court. Why leave the field to others? And I think maybe I'm a bit of a old consensus driven because I used to be a diplomat. You have to make, there's no point in us feeling virtuous about what we believe in. We have to go in and make a deal. Half a cake is better than none. And I gave you those examples of how Ireland, we have the bad left-wing aspects of the EU imposed upon us, not least on social policy as well, but we also have those free market competitive elements. So I think that it's worth fighting for in that fora. But I take your point, Alex, when you break down the political parties, you see most Irish people, most British people, they wouldn't even know what the makeup is. I mean, those of us who are Ian and I, who are politics wonks, know the makeup, in which we see MEPs, we elect them, we never see them again until their expenses are revealed usually. But we've got to bone up. We've got to go in there and fight, and that's why at yesterday's discussion, we were talking about the Thursday meetings. I was kind of amazed that there hadn't been a bigger one, and I think it's great that James Rogers was there. I don't know if he's in the room, keeping the flag flying. We got to get to Brussels. We got to be there all the time. But that's one point. The other point is this is more historical, and it goes back to what Barbara said there about the problem with the EU really is its rapid expansion. No disrespect to the East European countries coming through, but the feeling, it came from a different time that we just kept bringing in more and more countries in, and the discipline was lost. And we have to go back to something, and this is the point echoing what you were saying and what the gentleman over there was saying, smaller groups within. So, like, obviously with the Brexit vote, Ireland is looking around now for new clubs and alliances because we're so affected by the UK, because it's so near to us, we're so dependent on it. And in many ways it's brought home the illusion of our sovereignty, quite frankly. So we have a thing called a Small Advanced Economies Initiative set up by New Zealand. Very interesting, only 7 countries, Israel, Singapore, Ireland, 1 or 2 EU, I can't remember them all, and I think some in Scandinavia, because we're like-minded, similar population size. So, you know, we're free market, we're about competition, so even within the EU, we got to go back to those smaller groups to do those things, rather than this huge table of 27, 28, getting bigger, getting smaller, and yeah, but I think it's worth fighting the fight.
Sir, I'm going to have to disagree with you fairly profoundly. I think you're, because these subjects are vast subjects, it's very easy to fall, I respectfully offer, into the trap, the way your comments have been going. It's wrong to talk in extremes, but for reasons of brevity, allow me just a bit of license here. There's absolutely nothing pro-free market about the EU. 2 or 3 examples. Firstly, in banking, my speciality, the EU has done everything they possibly can to promote the illusion of some form of solvency, of a vast array of insolvent banks. Every single sci-fi bank and most of the others are completely insolvent with absolutely no hope of staying in existence without simply being the beneficiaries of money transfers from other people, the printing of money. Also, look at the way purchasing power parity operates within the EU. I have a business base now in Sofia as well as in London, and the reason I was attracted to establish something in Sofia is because the purchasing power parity is something like 10 to 1. You know, a meal that would cost you 250 euros in Mayfair in London is 25 in Sofia. I mean, the office rents, everything else, salaries. And smart entrepreneurs in Bulgaria are exploiting this. You know, 10% of all Europe's medical pills are put into packages in Bulgaria. German container lorries arrive there, and as I say, businesses have been established with highly qualified people and so on and so forth. I fully understand that Montenegro and many other countries, I'm fairly familiar with people in Serbia and Bosnia as well. I can see the appeal of joining the EU, and I'm very close to contacts in Dublin and Ireland as well. But to suggest that reaching out to the EU will somehow help some kind of free market thing merely because there was you know, a few bits of harsh reality dished out during the tough troika phase is an illusion. The EU elite guys know exactly what's going on, and they just drip feed bits of that and hammer it up for the press. That's all.
Thank you. Just two things I would like to mention. Number one, we live in something that's called reality, and that is something especially libertarian think tanks should remind themselves of every once in a while, and especially libertarians should remind themselves every once in a while and not walk in the same trap that communists are going into, looking at a theory and declaring that reality. That is something we should not do. Number two, we live in societies. Like it or not, we are social beings, some more than others. But we still live in societies, and societies have a certain fabric, they have certain rules, and they have certain paradigms in them. And there are certain values that are connected. And if we have too rapid change, people are unwilling to accept that. And if we don't explain things, people are not willing to accept that. And that is something we, as libertarians and conservatives, suck at sometimes very badly. Because, and we have been discussing that yesterday, we are not able to explain what we want, what we do. And last point I want to make. We live in a reality. We live in a world where the European Union is a reality. And we can say, let's dismantle it, let's sabotage it, let's talk it down as good as we can. Or we ask ourselves the question, how do we actually create this framework of freedom that we want? The framework that allows experiments.
Thank you. I'm just playing devil's advocate here, and I think us all being here at the European Resource Bank meeting, which is the meeting of all think tanks, of like-minded people, of friends who have a common goal, which is economic and individual freedom, economic growth and well-being for everybody. These are the core values that, I mean, summing up, I think we all can agree on and want to defend. So having said that, and if we look at the facts, not only that we have a European Union, which I am not in favor of, to be honest, I would have abolished it tomorrow if I could. So I'm very critical about the EU. Well, I'm very critical about the EU, but as Daniel said, it's a fact, and we have to reform it, obviously, because they will not hit the wall as we wish they would do. But so we have to work within to get our common goals, which is economic growth and well-being and competitiveness, working again. And the point is, and I'm very thankful to both of you, Iman and Gordon, for this argument, because we have lost in Europe competitiveness. We have failed. If you look at our numbers and figures, we were outperformed. At least the west of Europe was outperformed by the rest of the world. Europe does not matter. If you are in a debate in Asia, in Singapore, in Hong Kong, on a business table, the only European country that is being mentioned is Britain. And that's because of the old trade agreements and the old relationships. But the rest of Europe is wiped out. And this is the reality. And if we do not understand that, you know, we can talk about beautiful things about freedom and individual liberty as long as we can. But we need to see the facts. I mean, globalization, the rise of the middle class in China, in India, the shift from the industrial to the digital age, all these developments have been blocked out on the European Union level and also on the national level, at least in our Western European countries. Many Eastern European countries have done their homework at least 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and they're still living from this good things that they did back then. But I think if we do not wake up and if we do not find a common denominator and a common goal that where we can, and this is why I was thinking it were great to have this debate with the center-left people, because we need, if we want to make Europe survive or save the continent, whether it's the European Union or Europe, it's not the same, but I'm talking about Europe. And then we really need to do something together. It doesn't make sense if a Spanish think tank does something, if a French think tank does something, if our friends in Vilnius do a wonderful show. We have to do it together. And I think this is what we need to discuss now. Are we willing to do that? Yes or no? And I mean, I don't blame anybody who says, you know, fight your fight, I'm leaving. That's okay. It's your decision. But I think we really should discuss this openly among each other and then define a way of how we can reach that. Sorry for stirring up everybody.
Oh, that was a very important, and I would really like to applaud you for that comment, because we can decide, do we want to be constructive or destructive? Do we want to come up with solutions, or do we want to be the one who are always nagging? The answer for me is very simple. We need to be constructive. We need to convince people. And the thing is, the problems we're having have been described in 1996. Lord Ralph Dahrendorf wrote a very interesting piece about the European Union and the European Union of bureaucrats and how that's not worth it. How this European Union will never attract people and will never be sustainable in the long run. But even Hayek back in the day was talking about the prospect of the international order in the last chapter of The Road to Serfdom. So there are arguments for a bigger unit, a bigger economic unit, maybe also political unit. But the question is, how do we shape it? And the question we want to raise now, do you think that is something worth collaborating on? Yes or no?
So you mentioned that, you know, libertarians, we focus a little too much on theory, so maybe you would disagree with this, but as libertarians, we're probably all familiar with public choice theory. So maybe we were discussing this in the wrong sense. It's not that people who don't want to interact with the European Union, they're too idealistic. Maybe they think that it's not possible. There's too many entrenched interests, there's too many bootleggers and Baptists, and there's too much momentum in the system to reform it from within.
Well, let's take a coffee later and talk about libertarianism and narco-capitalism, why I think it's stupid. But it completely neglects one thing, and that is human nature. And this is the same mistake the communists make. They take an ideal picture of a human being they have in their head and declare it the standard, and that's not working. And that's the beauty of the Austrian school of economics, for instance, that look at human action. And human action cannot be predefined by logic patterns. Yeah.
Sorry, I made a couple of points without backing them up earlier. When I was talking about the European authorities doing what they can to prop up failed banking, I should have added that many people are not aware of this. For some reason, the PR machines are so effective at snuffing it out. But there have been significant changes in the last 2 or 3 years in the accounting rules that apply more or less only for banks. And these rules are designed to prohibit banks from reporting loan losses until the last possible moment, years after there's been an actual failure to pay. So banking is not operating under a system of global rules, as the media would have you believe, because the US accounting authorities have completely different rules. They've just introduced full life PVing of expected future losses into their accounts, and that's why there was a huge falling out between the London-based Brexit International Accounting Standards Board, which sets all the accounting rules through EFRAG, and their US counterparts under Terry Polly, the FASB people. And it got so acrimonious, this dispute, that the ISB guys tried to leapfrog FASB guys, and they went straight to the SEC to see if the SEC would support their own European rules, claiming that they were going to be more global. So there's real vicious infighting going on amongst the elite themselves about this. But the net effect of this is just to continue to put out massively effective spin that somehow things are changing. And Valdis Dombrovskis, who's just taken over from Michel Barnier, is hammering through all that. He gave a talk in London February the 10th towards the capital markets union. There really is nothing pro-free market about this. And also, all the stuff you can see now that Brexit gives you a perfect opportunity to accept Barbara's invitation and actually come to some kind of commonality here. These guys are absolutely bricking themselves. Donald Tusk's latest, quite good for him, tweet, what was it that after the election was called the other day, this Brexit story is like a Hitchcock movie. First the earthquake, then the tension rises. So please, I urge you to accept the offer from Barbara.
Just one there, and then we have something else planned.
Yeah, very quickly. I think Barbara's question about should we be constructive or destructive, I think that we should be constructive, that we should cooperate, and I think that there is more room for cooperation among Europeans with a much more decentralized Europe than with a stronger union. I think the European Union has gone wrong. The ideals 50 years ago were perfect. We all want a common market, let's say a free market, and what we should save from the European Union is the free transit of goods, data, people, workers, capitals. But that what we want to internationalize as well. But I think that the political integration has gone wrong, because instead of diminishing the power of the member state, it has made the member states even stronger, and in the wrong way, with less accountability, because everything is excused on, well, this is Brussels doing, you constituents in my country have nothing to say about it because it comes from Brussels. And this is all the wrong way. And so the debate between giving more power to the member state or to Brussels, I think it is wrong. We should give more power to the individual and to the markets and to local communities, and that includes local communities or regional communities to secede and to create new entities within the Union. And there should be international or European standards for those processes to go on in a smooth and rational way without creating tensions.
So there we have one more.
On the way to that, may I add what you said is very important. When the European Union was founded, or when our founding fathers, Delors, Schuman, De Gasperi, etc., founded it, this was a top-down process. And now, with social media and everything at our hands, we have the opportunity to shape it bottom-up as well and set the mindset. And I think this is why it is so important that we talk and cooperate and coordinate.
Thank you. I also would like to add something, since I'm new to the think tank waters and I'm trying to establish something new and I'm gathering experience. I noticed that in Europe, mostly think tanks are oriented to education and other things, and as we have European Union as it is now, maybe to have some impact in changes, we could have think tanks that are specialized in some fields and that will battle not just in their countries but in other countries as well. So if we have, for example, if we want to change taxes or something like that, we should have a think tank that is specialized in fighting against higher taxes in all countries in Europe, and so on and so on. And I see a lack of that, and when I had some discussion with colleagues in the United States, I saw that they have, for example, think tanks that are battling for some specific ideas and that they have a huge impact and influence on creating policies. And this is something that we should also maybe have in mind, that in future we should specialize, have think tanks specialized in one field, fighting for ideas, and on that way, slowly we will change the environment in Europe.
Okay, I can see there's a certain room for voluntary exchange and cooperation. Yes? No? Is there? Yeah. They're super excited here. Okay, I understand the weather is good, it's finally sunny, it's not snowing anymore. When I left Sofia in Bulgaria, it started snowing horribly. Yeah, I can understand that, but would you be a bit more enthusiastic about it? Yes? Can I have a yes? Okay, that was 2.5 yeses.
If we want to win the war,
Yeah,
then, hey guys, sorry.
Damn you individualists. We are hiding in freaking Montenegro. So the others can wiretap us.